smarter now than I used to be. And I get sucked into it.
But I'm like, I have no idea. Like, I am at the fish fry.
Experience is your best teacher.
What do you do? What do I do?
The older we get, the longer it takes to get.
How you doing? Good. How's your family?
Okay, thank you.
Perfect.
Good.
I got my grandbaby all weekend.
Oh, really? Nice.
When you said this guy's gonna
How old's your granddad?
is it a big team this
10 weeks now.
Oh my gosh, wow. That's exciting.
Yeah.
And that's all we're trying to do.
was he?
Going like bad week.
Okay, all right. I'll try to miss it.
It's funny watching it because all three of our children have children. See them different parenting styles.
Yeah.
So we went on Saturday down to the house and watched our 1-year-old, 14-month.
Oh, wow.
We watched him all day. When we come home, 10-week-old was at our house all week the rest of the weekend.
Oh, wow.
Even yesterday, they stayed Sunday night. My wife was holding him when I left.
That's so cute.
Come here.
Yeah. It's hard to leave that.
It was a good grandma time.
Yeah. That's nice.
It makes Grammy happy. And I'll do everything except for change. You know, it's crazy because I can C-section out a cow, bull calves, I can gut deer, and all that kind of stuff. Doesn't matter. But if a baby,
Yeah.
or crabs,
Really? That's funny. Yeah.
I'll be the next one. I'll be picking right next to you.
That's hilarious. Well, they're lucky to have you guys. I mean, to have like babysitters like that.
Right,
It's really helpful.
right.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so our daughter goes to college. She's got her bachelor's in vaccine. Booster every day of the week. Kids are always sick. My youngest had their baby. He's anti-vaxxer, but he doesn't social. I mean, it's okay if you want to have a vaccine, but you still got to get the kid out and get it exposed. And yes, you're going to get sick. It's just going to happen. And then, right, our youngest right now, just had the oldest baby, grandbaby. Well, they're getting, I mean, they've had them to the barn, animals, and that's where they're feeding dirt. And they're cutting my he's in committee, grinding and running snowmobiles in the shop with the baby right there.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
Yeah.
You know, the other one's
Really
like,
helpful. Yeah.
you walk in the house and you're out there, she's like,
Definitely different parenting styles.
oh,
Yeah.
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 Pull her up.
Yeah. That's funny.
Time to convert. Enough time to convert.
Yeah.
Think of it like if they do this in a week, 2 weeks. I mean, there's like 1 year old. So there were 3 centers. March 68, March 69, March 70.
Where's the money going to come from?
We got all kinds of money.
The House Transportation Infrastructure Committee will come to order. Would the clerk please take attendance?
Chair Outman.
Here.
Representatives Alexander.
Here.
Cara. Rupp.
Present.
Kuntz.
Here.
Nyer.
Here.
Preston.
Here.
Bonak. Frisbee. Wertz. Herzberg. Members present. We do have a quorum.
Excellent. Thank you, Madam Clerk. Vice Chair Alexander moves to adopt the minutes of the January 27th meeting. There being no objection, the minutes are adopted. Today we're going to be continuing our series of hearings on the SHIELD package. Today we'll be hearing testimony on House Bill 5325 through 27. Now we do have some subs for a couple of them before we get started. So with that, Rep. Bruck makes a motion to adopt the substitute H2 for House Bill 5325. Would the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Outman.
Yes.
Yes.
Kara. Bruck.
Yay.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Nyer.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Bonet.
Yes.
Frisbee.
Yes.
Wertz. Herzberg. Hope.
Yes.
Colazar.
Yes.
Andrews. Grant. Miller. Wilson. Mr. Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 passed. The substitute is adopted.
Substitute H2 for House Bill 5325 is adopted. Rep. Bruck makes a motion to adopt Substitute H2 for House Bill 5326. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Chair Outman.
Yes.
Representatives Alexander.
Yes.
Kara. Bruck.
Yay.
Kuntz.
Aye.
Nyer.
Yes.
Preston.
Yes.
Bonet.
Yes.
Frisbee.
Yes.
Wertz. Herzberg. Hope.
Yes.
Colazar.
Yes.
Andrews. Grant. Miller. Wilson. Mr. Chair, you have 10 yeas, 0 nays, 0 passed. The substitute is adopted.
Excellent. Well, Rep. Bruck, are you ready, sir? Always. Now I got a call from Congressman Tom Barrett. No, I'm just kidding. But please begin whenever you're ready, sir. You got a John James attack ad next, Chief, or what's in sir? Representative Bruck and Representative BeGole, please begin whenever you guys are ready.
Thank you, Chair Altman and members of the committee. Appreciate the opportunity to be here again. And I will not do any videos today. So we did have a good conversation, congenial conversation with the good congressman regarding the video. And we had some laughs, but we were both warrant officers. So we had that camaraderie. And I did tell him I publicly apologize, so I don't need to apologize again to you. But the SHIELD package has been an amazing process to get started. As I said last week, we've been working on this well over a year, lots of stakeholder involvement. There's a number of comments from the last week regarding possible federal preemption and such. We have had all of these bills put through legal review. There are a few bills that have a particular statement in there regarding federal preemption unless preempted by federal law. So we put in the clarifications to avoid those possible problems. There is a lot going on at the federal level, to not be naive in that either, that there's a lot of changes happening and occurring. And as a state, there may be some things in this legislation that we cannot do currently, but with movement at the federal level, it will allow us to very quickly phase into those, especially when it comes into the counter UAS activity, which will be the bills that we're talking about today. One of the questions which have done some rethinking and reaching out regarding, MDOT and the responses was one of the comments is, the responses, MDOT is not responsible for any responses. And just like we have a, United States Department of Transportation or the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, there's certain information that's maintained at the federal level on trucks. I think Representative Coons, parking spot number 49 today, you know this, but is also maintained at the state level because the state needs it. MSP needs this. Their motor carriers need this information. So I don't want to say that we're not replicating some of the information that's held at the federal level on drones, but at the state level, I think we have this responsibility, and the maintainer of this, being that MDOT already is in the drone, the UAS world and realm, it's a natural occurrence for them to be the maintainer of the information as well as, the restricted airspace that will come about with the passage of these bills regarding key facilities and infrastructure. They're not involved in the response, but it allows for a quicker response for information when there is a potential drone that is not able to be identified properly. So I just wanted to answer that little question. I'm going to turn it over to Representative BeGole. He's going to begin Representative Carter and Representative Herzberg could not be here today, so we'll speak on that as well. So I'll turn it over to prior Sheriff, Representative BeGole.
Thank you, Representative. Thank you, Chairman Outman and members of the committee for taking my bill up today. In today's world, technology is advancing faster than our laws can keep up. Drones have become increasingly common, used for recreation, photography, agriculture, and even emergency response. But they've also created new challenges for law enforcement and public safety. At large public events like festivals, parades, and sporting events, a single drone operated irresponsibly or with bad intentions can cause serious harm. Whether it's flying too low over a crowded area, interfering with aircraft, or being used for carrying dangerous materials, law enforcement needs clear authority and tools to respond quickly before somebody gets hurt. That's what House Bill 5326 is about, protecting the public in an age where technology moves faster than policy. This bill empowers federally trained and certified law enforcement officers to neutralize drones that pose an immediate danger to people or critical infrastructure. It doesn't target hobbyists or responsible drone operators. It focuses on those rare but serious cases where a drone becomes a threat. Officers shouldn't have to stand by helplessly if a drone is endangering a crowd, blocking medical helicopters, or compromising security operations. By providing clear legal authority and the proper tools to disable dangerous drones, we're giving law enforcement what they need to keep Michiganders safe. This is about prevention, safety, and accountability. It's about ensuring that our laws evolve alongside technology so that we can protect families, first responders, and communities at public gatherings. From our downtown festivals to our high school football games to major events across the state. This bill also provides common sense civil liability protection for officers acting under this authority. If an officer has to take action to stop a dangerous drone, they should not be personally liable to the operator for the damage to the aircraft. This is not shielding misconduct, it's protecting officers who act reasonably in an emergency situation to prevent harm. Michigan has been a leader in innovation and safety, and this bill continues that tradition, embracing technology while protecting the people who make our communities safe and strong. So thank you very much for taking this effort up, and I'll answer any questions if you'd like.
Well, I have a number of questions. I'll probably wait for law enforcement to come up here because I'm very curious how they determine what a threat is. What are the methods used to disable or intercept these drones? But I see we do have some law enforcement coming up, so I'll reserve my questions to them. Do you have further testimony on these bills, Representative?
Yes, Representative Carter's bill, which is 5326, essentially is a mirror of Representative BeGole's bill, except it applies to the key facilities and the infrastructure and allows for both local, state police as well as trained security on those sites to maintain or do detection and counter UAS activities. Excuse me. Many of our power plants are protected by security. Most of them are prior service. You know, and they probably have a lot more tools actually than a lot of our police force when you get to the nuclear power plants and the training that they do. But we also wanted to make it apply for those trained security forces and that they have that ability to protect our key facilities and our infrastructure, especially our power plants. Again, there's in place differing avenues for a prosecutor if it's just a hobbyist that accidentally flew over a place they weren't supposed to, or someone that knowingly or intentionally flies a drone over one of these key facilities. I think a question was asked last week, is there differing abilities for the prosecutor to charge? Yes, there are. There are some thresholds that we put in the bill from a felony to a misdemeanor, but really it boils down to that prosecutor. If it's an unknowingly, unwittingly individual that just happens to fly where they shouldn't, I don't think you're going to find too many prosecutors that are going to try to get them with a misdemeanor or felony. I think there's a lot of leeway there for the prosecutors and the law enforcement to charge someone or not charge someone. The key here is flying over those locations. So the question is asked, can you identify a bad or a good drone? There are methods, but currently in our state, we have no methods on site because they don't have the capability to do that. They don't have the authorization, sorry, not capability, the authorization. The capability is there. There are technologies, AI technology as well, included with different detection methods. There are many different ways to take a drone down as well. It's not just kinetic means. It's not shooting a bullet or a missile at a drone. Although we've seen $1 million missiles take down a $200 drone overseas, that's not the way it normally happens. But there's non-kinetic means of disrupting the line of communication or differing rays or avenues to disable that drone and bring it down safely. Again, watching for that liability, which is when a drone comes down, what does it hit? We have to bring them down safely, and we have to be cognizant. And as Representative BeGole mentioned, not holding police officers liable for the damage to the drone. There could be damage to something else, but we need to be, as long as they're acting in a knowingly and a safe manner, that they can't be held liable for that. And if someone unknowingly flies a drone where they shouldn't be, well, that drone shouldn't be there, period. Whether it was intentional or whether it was nefarious, we should have within our statute the ability for these locations to protect themselves, because it only takes a few seconds. That decision-making matrix has to be very quick and small. And in order for them to properly protect themselves, and they have to have a space where no drone really should be. And once that's established, then if the drone is in that location, that drone comes down, because they do not really have the time to analyze whether, that's a weaponized drone, if it's there for nefarious purposes. If it's there, it needs to be gone. So that's what we want in the law. And then you want me to talk about Representative Herzberg's
Yeah, why
bill
don't
a little
you
bit?
touch on 5327?
Yeah,
while we're at
it's all interrelated, but this is our personal trespassing protection. So we're just adding, we currently have some have law providing protection from harassment from drones on private property. This simply states that they can't interfere with the privacy or the general idea that a person should have that peace on their own property. So it's not saying that drones cannot fly over private property, but they cannot invade the peace and the comfort of the home dweller or the person on that property. And it does not allow anywhere in our legislation for private citizens to take down a drone. Currently, if you take down a drone that's flying over your property with a baseball bat, a gun, or otherwise, you are liable for the damage to that drone and possible civil infraction as well. Nowhere in our legislation in the SHIELD package does it allow for private citizens to, go out there and take down drones on their property or otherwise, even if it's interfering with them, even if it's, they have to call the police, and there's a process we put in place for prosecution to someone that's invading that privacy.
Well, that's what I was wondering. So this necessarily doesn't enable private citizens to down these drones that are harassing their property, but it allows law enforcement to engage, in that harassment.
Yes, sir. Yeah, and even a police, if they were called out, you called 911 or you called the police that there was a drone, flying over videotaping your kids in your pool. Like, that's a big, you would want to tear that thing out of the sky. You can't take it down, nor when the police show up. If it's not a safety hazard, as Representative BeGole mentioned in his bill, this is for public safety. Unless that drone is posing an actual threat to life or limb, the police, they're going to charge that individual. They'll have the capability to find out who's controlling that and then charge them through the processes.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, we don't want private citizens pulling out their 30-06 and, taking pokes in the sky at these
Nor the
things.
police. I mean, we don't want a police showing up at your house and taking down a drone, but unless it was a threat, an actual threat, which is the bill 5325.
Very good. Thank you, gentlemen. Do we have any questions for the bill sponsors? No? We'll see none. Thank you for your time. You guys did such a good job.
No questions, not a single question.
One. Wow.
You did great.
Yeah,
Representative. Good
You guys
job.
knocked it out of the park. So appreciate your time. We're going to read in some cards and some other folks that are wishing to testify. We'll start with wishing to speak supporting the bill, the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. Officers, you guys want to come on up? And looks like you guys are only addressing 2 of the bills out of the 3. Is that correct? 53, 25, and 26?
25 and 26,
Okay.
yes, Mr. Chair.
Excellent. Go ahead and begin when you're.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, for taking up this important legislation. My name is Tony Buffa. I am the Director of Legislative Affairs for the Oakland County Sheriff's Office. I am joined here by Deputy Jake Bouchard, who runs our drone unit and is our resident expert on all things drones at our office. With that, I'll turn it over to him.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Mr. Chair, representatives of the committee. I am proud to be here on behalf of not just our agency, but also Oakland County agencies and the citizens that we both police and serve. I would first like to say that I wholeheartedly agree with Representative Bruck's bill to both protect law enforcement from not just potential civil liability, but also enabling them to have the will and the ability to act in a crisis situation. I think that is, fortunately for us, something that most law enforcement officers don't lack, but oftentimes can be the one difference maker in a crisis situation. So we wholeheartedly support the bill in its current language to protect law enforcement and trained security personnel. That said, I would go a little bit further and try and provide an intermediate solution. The potential nefarious drone is one of many situations that law enforcement can find itself in. So for context, the Oakland County Sheriff's Office has had a drone unit since 2013. We were one of the first agencies in the state to start a beyond visual line of sight in 2021, and then in 2024 we started a counter drone team as a portion of the drone unit. Since then, we have had the ability to work at different special events such as the Woodward Dream Cruise. And what we see most commonly is not necessarily that people are operating in a intentionally nefarious nature, but oftentimes in an uneducated one, in which case the proper role is not necessarily to pull out your .30-06 or your buckshot and bring the drone down over the crowd, but potentially just walk up, shake hands, and engage in a little bit of community policing. In that regard, today, law enforcement has very little to no tools to effectively try and make sure that the public is kept safe. So while we wholeheartedly support this bill, we're hoping that this is one of a starting point where you can truly codify not just the ability for law enforcement to protect a public event from a nefarious drone, but also engage in a policing of the sky, if you will. Just like you'd see with motor carrier laws where there are certain federal statutes that we've adopted, we would like to see the rules of the road for the sky, where some of the FAA regulation is adopted as a rule of law that gives us the ability to truly enforce on not just a high crisis event, but a much lower tier, and enable people to truly operate drones in a manner that's both safe but also enabling for them.
Now, I see that through the latest National Defense Authorization Act, they have authorized law enforcement to down or intercept these drones. Will you guys be receiving training on that from the federal government, from the FBI, or
Yes, sir.
some sort of federal agency?
The process is starting with FIFA cities that are hosting the upcoming World Cup events. After those cities both have the training but also the funding to go out and purchase the systems for both detection and mitigation, the federal government intends to open it up to other cities and counties based on those cities and counties' commitment to proper mitigation and airspace awareness.
Now let's talk about how you guys will analyze a situation. So how will you as law enforcement determine, what is a threat in terms of unmanned aircraft?
Very much so depends on the stake of the situation. For example, the Woodward Dream Cruise, 13 miles, about 1 million to 1.5 million attendees. That is somewhere where you can wholeheartedly expect people to be pulling drones out to get video of classic cars, whether that be theirs or friends. You can expect them to just be generally enjoying the environment. That, in our use case, is much more difficult to figure out who is going to be nefarious versus who is just an uneducated actor. But then you turn to the NFL draft, which we helped support, both running drone operations and also assisting counter-drone operations with Customs and Border. That one was a hard and fast no-fly zone. If a drone took off inside of that area, we would immediately detect it. We had a pre-approved list of aircraft, and we could immediately compare both serial numbers but also operator locations to that pre-approved list. And if they didn't classify in that list, we immediately shut down the airspace to all aircraft.
So depending on the situation and the circumstances, it's
Very
gonna be-
much so.
Yeah. Let's talk about methods used to, to down these, intercept these. Walk me through that just a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously the preferred is never to pull a gun and point it into the sky. What goes up must come down. That includes drones and bullets. So the primary means that we would like to pursue is technological, whether that be general RF jamming, where you jam the control signal or you jam the GPS signal, forcing the drone to return home, whether that be more sophisticated measures where you actually target the aircraft itself and you attempt to, I would hesitate to use the word hack, but that's an effective descriptor where you actually break into its communication chain and you direct it to go to a new location and land. Or if you use some type of actual EM systems that flat out disable its onboard internal measurement units or its actual navigation systems, causing it to lose control mid-flight. Those are the most common ones.
Gotcha. And so you have multiple methods at your disposal.
As of today, local law
right now.
enforcement does not. That's all restricted to federal government.
But that technology it's there.
Yes.
Like when you guys get the authorization and the training to use it, like it will be available to you guys.
Correct.
Okay. Members, do we have any other questions for these guys? We'll go to Representative Bonak first.
So I just want to make this clear. Now, you currently don't have any ability to bring down a drone,
No, sir.
and so it's all federal. So how would you be working with them to? It would be a licensed program where you'd go and actually learn how to do that. And how would the federal government feel about you as a state entity or a county entity going after drones, since that's the purview of the federal government?
That's actually what their intended bill is to try and enable. They wholeheartedly recognize that the potential of drones is much larger than any other aviation system. I mean, there are well over 300,000 drone operators in the United States today. So they're trying to enable both county, local, tribal, and state entities to be able to effectively both detect and mitigate drones at the same level they have. They're putting guardrails specifically on it in the circumstance around it, trying to make sure that you're not doing it arbitrarily over your house or your best friend's house, but in situations where there's a genuine concern for public safety.
Representative Nyer.
Thank you, Chair. I guess outside of visual, how do you detect the drones? Is there other than visual? And then how do you, when you have multiples in the air, how do you determine which one's which is, approved or one that has permission to fly versus one that you need to take care of?
Yeah, very much so. There's primarily two different methods, both passive and active. Active detection means you're very, very aggressively looking for radio signals and you're identifying them. Generally, that's done with either an existing system that is built by the same manufacturer that manufactures drones, or that's built by a company that specifically builds RF detection systems to target aircraft. Passive is where you're using either radar or optical sensors to visually pick them up in the sky. In those circumstances, the best one that we can use is active. That's where we have the ability to identify your drone based on either serial number or other identifying information that either your system is broadcasting or we're able to pick up from your system. In that circumstance, there's an easy path for pre-approval in what we would term a TFR, a temporary flight restriction, to make sure that you are either A, allowed to fly or not allowed to fly. And assuming that you are, it's a very no involved process. And if you're not, at that point, you're going into mitigation.
Representative Brock.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Tech Bouchard, for being here today. I will point out in 5326 there is a provision for enforcing federal aviation law, FAA guidelines as well. My question is, so you you represent, I mean, you're just one police officer in one sheriff department, but as far as your ability, you stated you do not have the authorization to take a drone down.
Not as of today, no.
Yes, not as of today. You have the ability to track.
We do.
But there's a lot you can't do with that information. So could you
so.
run through, you track a drone, what is the process if they're where they shouldn't be, or you're not sure their nefarious nature or not? What is the process when you identify a drone flying where it should not be?
So as of today, once we pick up the location of the aircraft and the operator, we have a 5-person team on our counter-drone team that is trained on both the very gray legalities of drone operations, but also just general tactical approaches and making sure that they're operating in a safe manner. A 2-person element from that team will make contact with the operator, inform them whether or not they're operating legally. Unfortunately, the only time we're going to make contact is if you are violating some law, and request that they bring it down. As of today, the only legal ability that we have to bring a drone out of the sky is if that drone is directly interfering with public safety operations. That would constitute either public safety drones or public safety helicopters. For example, 2 years ago at Dream Cruise, we had a drone come within 500 feet of our helicopter. That's one that we definitely have the ability to bring down. So at that point, we would tell them either they can bring it down and it's going to be no harm, no foul. We've educated them, and then they can kind of get on with their day, or if they decide that they are not going to comply with that, our counter-drone team are trained drone operators, in which case we will then bring the drone back and land it ourselves.
And for those that might think that 500 feet away, it's a tiny little drone, this is a big helicopter, what kind of risk does that pose?
That's an extreme risk. There are numerous FAA studies, but the most important one is that a drone impact at air in altitude can easily bring down our helicopter. And we had at that time 4 deputies on board the helicopter. So had there been an impact, that likely would have been a potentially fatal crash with all 4 pilots and operators on board.
And just to clarify as well, your staff, you don't have the ability to do what you feel you could do. Is there the willpower to do that?
Very much so. It's not necessarily a question of desire, it's a question of legality for us, which is why we are very appreciative of the ability to speak here and supportive of this current legislation.
Well, thank you for what you do and your folks in the field. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. We'll go back to Representative Bonak.
Would you just give me a little idea? Do you have special equipment that now could jam potential drone or detect drones? And what sort of equipment is that, and how much would that cost?
So we do have equipment to detect it. As an agency, we were one of the first actually in the state to onboard AIRSPACELINK as a proper airspace awareness tool. We also have a contract with ADJOURN, one of the largest commercial vendors for drone detection. Unfortunately, all of that allows us to locate both the drone and the operator. It does not allow us to actually mitigate, which is where you'd either be jamming or bringing the drone out of the sky. So the proverbial "we can wave as they go by" is very true in this case. But we do have sophisticated sensors today to detect. That being said, the cost is relatively high for the comparison range that it covers. For example, a single system to cover potentially up to 5 miles away can range anywhere from $25,000 to $75,000 per year per system. So when you're talking about true airspace awareness, you are talking about a desire that needs to be there for proper airspace awareness.
Representative Frisbee.
2 questions. You guys are on board with this. How about the rest of the sheriffs in the state of Michigan Sheriff's Association? Are they endorsing this approach as well?
I couldn't necessarily speak for the Michigan Sheriff's Association. I can speak anecdotally. I sit on the board of the Michigan Drone Association, and I also sit on the Michigan Counter-Drone Task Force. And I can say that both sheriffs and local cities are in support of it from an anecdotal standpoint.
Thank you. And thanks, Chair. Funding. With the federal push, is there funding available besides the training to help with equipment?
There is.
Okay.
The actual training of the equipment is actually on the agency. The federal government is specifically trying to ensure that the agencies have access for funding for the equipment itself.
Okay.
But a barrier to entry right now is actually the ability to send officers and deputies down for the training.
Thank you.
Good questions. Members, do we have any other additional questions for these folks? Oh, Representative Kara.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Quick question regarding emerging technology as it relates to drones. What knowledge do you have about artificial intelligence and how it might be used by civilians and or government in the space of drone usage?
As it relates specifically, generally AI is used for some type of detection on your video, whether that be looking for a make and model of a vehicle or a specific person. One of the things that we've actually been looking at doing is testing AI recognition in the use case of missing persons, where when we had one of these unfortunately 2 days ago, a 5-year-old autistic boy left the house and was out in the cold for the better part of 5 hours. In that circumstance, you can then put in his last known. He was wearing a red shirt and blue jeans, and hopefully the video will then populate. If you see that on your screen, it'll draw a box around it for the human to investigate. As of now, that's where AI is going. The potential could be autonomous flight. As an agency, we always want to have a human in the loop, so we are always looking for a system that augments humans' abilities, doesn't replace them.
Thank you.
Well, seeing no further questions, gentlemen, we really appreciate your expertise and your knowledge. Thank you for coming to testify before us today.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Next up, we have wishing to speak on House Bill 5325 and 5326, supporting the bills, Michael Helander, the AIRSPACELINK. And Michael, begin whenever you're ready.
Chairman Ottman and members of the committee, thank you for allowing me to support HB 5325 and 5326. My name is Michael Helander. I'm the co-founder and CEO of AIRSPACELINK, and we're based here in Michigan. We provide a drone operations management system, essentially an air traffic control for drones for municipalities, federal agencies, and commercial operators across the United States. I want to be clear, so you have a clear understanding of what we do. We don't build drones. We don't fly drones. We've built the digital infrastructure in the airspace. Think about that as the guardrails, the speed limits, the altitude heights, the temporary flight restrictions on behalf of the FAA to make sure people understand where they can and can't fly. Our role is to provide a common operating picture so authorities can immediately distinguish between authorized drones activity and potential security threats. A lot of the questions that you're seeing tonight or today. And that capability is becoming urgently necessary today. We've reached an inflection point. Drones are no longer an emerging technology. They're a persistent and growing security challenge. And Michigan communities need the legal authority these bills provide to respond effectively. Let me give you a real example of what's happened here in Michigan. In December 2024, an unauthorized drone flew over the Green Day concert in Detroit in Comerica Park. The band was pulled off the stage mid-performance. At the time, Detroit police didn't have access to live airspace awareness. During the disruption, they contacted AIRSPACELINK. We have a system running there that we were using for other events. We were able to immediately show them where the drone was flying and critically, where the pilot was standing with the controller 5 blocks away from the stadium. The officers went to the location and resolved the situation. The pilot turned out to be clueless, and they were not malicious. But they were able to find the person. Same issue, they found the person and were not sure what to do once they caught him. Same as with Sheriff Bouchard. Detroit is now a customer. Shows an example that they have all the systems, they saw the value in it, purchased the systems themselves, and now they're identifying, and again, their mitigation is to walk up to those people and have those conversations. They cannot do much during the incident. That incident demonstrates something very important. Real-time airspace awareness isn't a convenience, it's operationally essential. And not every operator is clueless. Across the country, we're seeing deliberate and increasing sophistication of drone threats. The Pentagon Inspector General has documented repeated drone incursions over military installations, including facilities tied to nuclear deterrence and the F-35 training. Correctional facilities are facing hundreds of contraband dropped via drone. In Georgia, who's one of our customers, more than 70 incidents were reported and detected in a single month, just a couple months ago. That's basically several per day. They're being inundated with drone incursions and trying to drop off things into the facility, but they don't have any actions that they can take. These are not theoretical concerns. Unauthorized drones can disrupt events, compromise infrastructure, support criminal activity, and in the worst cases, be weaponized. The challenge is knowing what is in the sky before you can detect how to respond. Michigan airspace is getting crowded fast. Amazon began drone deliveries at Pontiac and Hazel Park late last year, and now flies hundreds of missions per hour. Walmart has announced 150 new drone delivery locations nationwide being deployed this year. Police and fire departments across Michigan are using drones as first responder. A company called Zipline is going to start medical delivery, and they're planning to grow their drone operations by 15% per week starting 2 weeks ago. That is for medical, and some of that's going to be in Michigan as well. So when a drone appears, the first question is it friend or foe? I think that's the same question we had here. Who is who up there? If it's going to be that complicated. Is it an authorized delivery, a police aircraft responding to an emergency, or an unauthorized drone that poses a risk? Without a unified operational picture, agencies are forced into bad choices, either ignoring threats or grounding legitimate operations. Neither is acceptable. Detection alone is not enough. What matters is coordinated response. Today, without a clear legal framework, different agencies may see different pieces of the problem. Lack of authority to act or the inability to share information quickly. HB 5325 and 5326 solve that problem. They provide clear authority for Michigan law enforcement to act while establishing the framework for multi-agency coordination. Timing matters here. The FAA's new Beyond Visual Line of Sight rules are expected this spring. These rules will enable a mass expansion of commercial drone operations that create economic opportunity, which is amazing here in Michigan, but also a security risk. Michigan needs to be ready for both. These bills do three critical things. First, they enable unified threat response, clear authority to act when a drone poses a legitimate threat. Number two, they explicitly protect critical infrastructure, including utilities, correctional facilities, transportation hubs, military installations, and public venues. Third, they establish a framework for coordination, allowing cities, counties, state, federal partners to share a real operational picture together. Michigan is well positioned to lead with the Advanced Aerial Innovation Region in Southeast Michigan is growing commercial operations. The largest drone conference in the world will be in Detroit in May, Exponential. We can be the leaders in the United States in security and operations altogether. But leadership requires the right legal foundation. Chairman Ottman, members of the committee, drones are here. The skies above Michigan communities are growing more crowded every month, and we're measuring that. The question isn't whether this technology will expand, it already has. The question is whether Michigan will have the authority and infrastructure to manage it safely. HB 5325 and 26 provide the authority. I urge you to support. Thank you. I'll take questions.
Well, thank you for your testimony, Michael. We really appreciate it. Certainly sounds like we're going to have a very crowded airspace with all the activities going on in terms of drone delivery services and private enthusiasts and the whole gamut. So we got our work cut out for us. Mm-hmm. We'll turn it over to questions from members, starting with Representative Coons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Helander, it's a two-part question. Can you tell me how is public safety going to use this system, the coordinate, and give us, no pun intended, the 10,000-foot view? And then number two, how does that coordinate with these bills? How do those two tie together?
So I'll give an example. We're a FIFA-approved platform. So I think we mentioned FIFA. We've just been awarded the first city, the first one to support their integration of UAS detection. That is helping set the frameworks across the entire country. This is an emergence coming through FEMA, the funding to deploy this, but it is setting the framework to provide a lot of the frameworks that we're talking about here. It's actually being done at these FIFA cities right now over the next 5 months. So this aligns well with those. It's starting with detection, so deploying the detection systems, RF detection, remote ID, radar, and optical to make sure we cover everything coming in. And then the counter is being, public safety is being deputized for the first time with FBI through this training that we've talked about, that they can then use a combination of kinetic, which is a drone that will take down another drone with a net over a crowd, or the jamming or those capabilities. And they're being trained and they can buy that equipment through the funding. So there's $250 million today, over the next month, going down to those FIFA cities to buy all the equipment, to be deputized, to get trained, and then after FIFA, they will now have that capability. That framework is actually going to get pushed down. There's a following $250 million coming behind it for the rest of the country for governments to then pick up these things. But the frameworks are being created as we speak, and those FIFA frameworks are aligning with what the state of Michigan, and just Michigan's going alongside some of the first movers right now. Hopefully that helps.
Thank you.
Representative Bonak.
Thank you for your testimony. Something you said caught my attention. Would you please describe how a drone would act as a first responder?
Yeah, that's one of the fastest growing segments in the United States right now. One of our fastest growing customers. To give you a sense, NYPD is one of our customers, launching drones out, calls for service, shark detection, swift water rescue. You know, what we're finding is as a call comes in for service, the systems that through dispatch are determining if it's safe to send a drone out ahead of time. A lot of it's, we're finding a lot of de-escalation. Someone standing out front of a store with a gun. I've sat live with this. Drone went out ahead of time. 3 vehicles were coming on scene, and we were able to detect that he was holding a lighter and he was lighting a cigarette. So they de-escalated before they even got there. So drones as first caller is in an incident, especially in areas that you can't get to easily.
So in other words, it would be getting a video view of what's going on.
Yeah, you got it. Eyes in the sky. Sometimes it's done tactically, but today it's called a drone in a box. They're on call. And we have folks in the room here that run their drones as the first responder DFR programs. And it's saving a lot of lives right now. And we get to hear stories every day being at our company. It's amazing.
Representative Brock.
Yes, sorry. Hard of hearing. You had mentioned a unified operational picture, and that's what you guys provide. When we discuss like mobility corridors, and you talked a little bit about Amazon and Walmart, without restrictions, and then compared to with restrictions, how does that affect your ability to provide that mobility corridor?
So we primarily are approved by the FAA to help manage the airspace at the federal level. What's happening locally, for example, is large operators coming and flying, and public safety not having the equipment to know that that's a legitimate drone flying through and doing a delivery or whatever it might be, a utility inspection or roof inspection. We help figure out, and the tools that we provide to understand who's who and where they're standing, and to be able to say that is registered as a delivery drone. And this framework will give, once they do friend from foe, have better insights and potentially funding, is to be able to identify, remove the noise, the 95% of the operations that are known, and focus on that one item, and then be able to enforce. Today, you see 5 drones over a stadium. That might be a news drone. they're pre-approved, and then they'll now be able to have the tools and the frameworks to, it's very gray right now. How about that? There's a lot of working through ordinances with intent and trying to figure out how do you do something or say something to the operator. We need that framework. So then it's the same from city to city. Today I go city to city and like, well, we do it this way and we do it that way. Just a framework would help even at the state level and gives some of these folks a little bit more backing.
Yeah. Are you aware of the items that the city of Romulus passed?
Yes.
And that does
They're
that
a customer of ours. City of Southfield, Sterling Heights, City of Detroit. Our systems are deployed, Oakland County, are throughout the United States. We're known as a government platform. So they are so they have actually integrated their system with DHS and TSA. So they deployed a system. DHS and the airport actually didn't have access to understanding drones outside their fence line. And we got them to do a multi-agency, multi-jurisdictional agreement to help each other out. Now, is there a framework for that? Not really. We just got it set in place, and now they put in some ordinance for takeoff and landing to help support the safety of our passengers flying into that city.
But doing a statewide framework would allow you to make better corridors and that mobility.
Absolutely. Right now, we don't want patchwork. We're getting a lot of patchwork, and we're trying to say, hey, this city did it that way, and this city, that county's doing it this way. And we have some groups here that are helping like pull everyone together, herding the cats. That's what we're looking for. Is we're the best cat herders out there, and we do have to deal with the federal government. We are still working with DHS, Border Patrol, and they're asking how to work with Detroit Police, and then the Sheriff's Department that overlays that. So we have layers and layers of integration.
And regarding, you mentioned airports, deliberate incursions that may happen. We'll take Metro, for instance. Like, they now have the capability to see the drones outside their property as well as inside their property?
Yes, and again, the federal agency does that's there, not the airport. This is what gets really interesting. It's the TSA and DHS for the working. So they're seeing it, but then there's operations too. So there's all these layers that we're finding. This is all new for everyone. I think we all understand this is a new realm for everywhere, and we're learning by, man, everyone wants access to this system because they just want to know, is that a drone doing an inspection of an airplane? Because I don't speak with the FAA, or I don't work with TSA, DHS, or I'm Delta using a drone. So there's on aircraft. So that coordination is something we're working with Joint Base Charleston, and we just won the Air Force Base in Kadena in Japan, which is one of the most prestigious. They're having the same problems. So our systems are helping navigate everyone that's on that base to know who's who.
So the TSA could see a drone coming onto the airport property, but Metropolitan Airport Authority may not have a clue that it's flying toward the 747
I don't think they've signed the agreement,
taking
but they
off.
share information, and that's where I mentioned when the Green Day concert happened, I was at dinner. I pulled up my smartphone and I said, yeah, he's standing on the building 5 blocks away. So there's still the sharing of information, but it's a very manual process.
Yeah, currently.
Currently, because it's kind of gray of how you share the information and who gets shared and who has what authority.
And AI was mentioned earlier. You use AI in any of your platforms, in your identification platform?
We're careful with AI because we are a federal and a DOW integrated system. We have companies that once we get their systems and drones up and running, the IAI is like Zero Eyes. Once we deployed our system in Joint Base Charleston with the Air Force, they then use our system to send drones out along the fence line that detects people that have guns in their hands and for security. So AI tends to, we enable that. We're the roads, we help people fly, and then the AI does on top of that.
But are you confident your system could identify, I mean, go back to Metro, that drone flying and it's going toward the flight path of a plane taking off or landing, your drone detection system could see that drone and identify it and its potential flight path in time to mitigate it if mitigation measures were available?
Yes, even here in the Capitol, we've just deployed a system, and it's up to them what level of security they want. So here they're looking at like a 500 feet, 1,000 feet, 2,000 feet, and you can actually get alerts as the drones are coming through. And that's where we're getting into a drone can fly through like 5 different jurisdictions in 30 seconds. That's the other thing about sharing data. How does a sheriff work with a local police department where they're coming through multiple agencies in the state of Michigan. And that is where we're doing our best to, hey, here's the data, and oh, wow, it just flew through here. So that's another thing we need to make sure these frameworks give you a framework to be able to work together.
Thank you, Mr. Hairlander.
Thank you.
Representative Frisbee.
Thank you, Chair. Your testimony about the Georgia Corrections Facilities really caught my attention.
November, that was.
Can you provide that to the data or the source of that to the committee members so that we can review that? I think it's really important.
Yeah.
When you have 83 county jails, several city lockups, state prisons, and contraband being dumped into all of them potentially, that's just something we need to be getting ahead of and getting ahead of quick. So if we have the data, have the factual stuff, it's not that I don't believe you, I just want a source.
It's an article that, it just came out this week. This is really relevant. We'll get that to you.
And that can help guide us in decision-making processes of policy and funding. Appreciate it.
And you really don't know until you install the systems to
Correct.
see what is happening.
Yes.
And we see that every day. Within days, I have a meeting with Grand Rapids, just plugged one in, and holy smokes. You just don't know what's going on.
Very scary for the corrections folks and actually the folks that are inside the jail.
Absolutely. There's weapons coming in, and
prisoners, and everybody's at risk. So appreciate it.
We'll do that.
Well, thank you, Michael. I appreciate your testimony and getting their perspective from AIRSPACELINK. I'm sure we'll hear from you again, so thank you for your testimony.
Thank you, everyone.
We're going to move on now to the last testifier of the day, wishing to speak on in support of House Bill 5325 and 26, opposing 5327. We have Matt Rybar, Michigan Drone Association.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee, Representative Bruck, for all your continued work on this package. It really has been a pleasure working with you this year on so many of these different bills. I'm going to skip through most of this testimony because Oakland County and AIRSPACELINK have done a wonderful job summarizing many of the state of affairs with drone detection mitigation while it's needed right now in the state. We all know that there's these incidents that continue to happen on a daily basis. We're going to use the U of M example where this year during game days they had 10 TFR incursions, so a temporary flight restriction goes up for an NCAA football game an hour before and lasts till an hour after that event. So 10 times during game day they had TFR incursions. 9 out of those 10 pilots incursions they were able to find, locate, and asked that pilot to get that drone back on the ground. The other lifted about an inch off the ground, landed, and was on the way before they could get units there to the scene. They use at U of M, they use their drone program in conjunction with their counter-drone program. So drone gets detected, they use their drone program to zoom over quickly and try to find and locate that operator in a more efficient way. I think the big takeaway from those two numbers, though, 9 and 10, is that all of those 9 operators were compliant. They said, absolutely, my bad, violated this TFR, I'll land the drone. Right now in the state of Michigan, we don't have any ability to enforce if that operator isn't compliant. We can ask them, we can document, we can then report it to the FAA, report it to the FBI, they'll conduct an investigation. And thankfully the FAA and the FBI have put on some massive sanctions like the Green Day pilot and others on these pilots that will prohibit them from doing it again. But in that physical moment, we're unable to take action even if we're right there standing next to the pilot. We can't lay hands on that pilot because we don't have an enforcement mechanism to do so. And so today we're testifying in support of these two bills. We know that this is the start of a long process about how do we get technology that is available and able to do some of this mitigation over time. We're not in theater. We can't jam everything out of the sky and watch it fall us on the law enforcement side of the world. We have to account for that ground risk. And so there's not a ton of technology that can strategically, surgically remove those drones from the sky, but there hasn't been the legislation. And so we're very hopeful that with the federal legislation, with state legislation, companies want to innovate and work through and create those types of systems to be able to surgically remove those drones out of the sky that are nefarious and in a safe way. Just wanted to kind of recap what has happened on the federal side briefly in a more bulleted structure. It's amazing, too. We talked last week about making sure our legislation can evolve over time. Since we've started this bill package with Representative Bruck, that this legislation on the federal side has evolved drastically. We went from having no sight of federal authority to last fall, DHS created a temporary program where they were going to deputize local state and local law enforcement in FIFA cities to do that enforcement under an FBI jurisdictional task force. 1/1 of this year, under the Safer Skies Act with our military authorization, we did finally get the regulatory authority to mitigate drones. However, the Secretary of Homeland Security, Secretary of Defense, and the Secretary of Transportation now are going to govern what that process looks like. They created the FBI Training Academy. They're going to create other schools and things to ramp up that authority. So while we statutorily have that authority right now, a bill like this can help continue to encourage the rollout of that authority because we've already been told it's going to be very hard to get many people through that federal training in 2026. We're hopeful that by the end of the year we have at least a couple across the state. We're hopeful that other federal agencies ramp that up, but they are still the gatekeeper to that authority as well. So that will be coming over time. Lastly, we hope that approved equipment list continues to grow. I mentioned innovation in ways of trying to strategically remove those aircraft. Right now, it's very limited in scope. The technology will continue to evolve on the bad actor side, and so we have to have the ability to innovate and continue to move that needle forward. So overall, we 100% support these two bills. We're very appreciative of your work, Representative Bruck, Representative BeGole, and others who have helped lead this on the law enforcement side. Briefly want to talk about House Bill 5327, which we oppose today. We're hopeful that we can get it to the finish line. There is some language in that bill, and I'm just going to read the first sentence. A person shall not knowingly and intentionally operate an unmanned aircraft system over a private dwelling, and then talks about some interrupting the private property and enjoyment of that dwelling. Unfortunately, while in theory, we 100% agree with that. Drones should not be disrupting somebody on their property. Property rights are a thing and need to be respected. Unfortunately, though, the FAA has been very clear about the path that we can take on the state side to regulate that airspace. There's 3 different statutes that people can fly or choose to fly under as a drone operator. The recreational flyers fly under something called 44809. They have to go get a trust certificate. So all of us that want to go to Walmart and buy a drone, we have to go and get a trust certificate from the FAA on the website and be educated briefly about that process. Most are not in compliant with that. Then there's commercial operators that fly under Part 107. They go through a licensing, take a test with the FAA, get certified. And lastly, many governmental operators fly under Part 91. So the FAA has consistently said that anything that leaves the ground belongs to them to regulate. And we can regulate things like privacy matters and other things, but that word over in there, unfortunately, puts us in that FAA preemption. And so what we've continued to ask of the sponsors and others is revising 2 different statutes. One would be the Voyeurism Act, MCL 750.539, to add language about the use of unmanned aircraft in those types of situations, which would give local law enforcement some grit to stand on if they were investigating a situation where somebody might be flying a drone in a manner that would violate that statute. And then secondly is a concept of creating the ability to adopt some of the federal aeronautics codes into state law so that we could have the ground to stand on when somebody was violating already a lot of these different federal laws that exist today. The Commercial Vehicle Code does have a route forward for us in Michigan to what that's looked like before, and we'd be open to continually to work on that legislation together. Committee, thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Matt. You laid out your case really well. Do we have any questions for Mr. Rybar while he's up here? No? We'll see none. Thank you for your testimony. Oh, hold on. Not so fast. We have a question for Representative Bruck.
I always have questions. So I appreciate the support, especially on 53, 25, and 26. And on 27, you mentioned the regulation. So currently in statute, if you're a sex offender, you can't fly a drone over somebody's property. Like, how is our state we're already regulating some drone activity over private property as well currently, right?
The word over, I don't believe appears. I will have to look at that statute specifically, but I don't believe it appears. I could be incorrect, though.
Okay. Yeah, I'll read it. No, I got to find it. Sorry. I'm on my phone. looking at it. An individual who is required to register as a sex offender, and it lists a bunch of acts, shall not operate an unmanned aircraft system. So I guess that's the operation of it. If potentially, given your prior law enforcement, if someone was they're not going to be registered, obviously, they're a hobbyist flying a drone, what would be the interaction that police could have with that individual if they're caught flying a drone over someone's private property?
And the law enforcement side, we're going to educate on the federal law side. We're going to encourage them to bring that drone down, tell them they're in violation of some federal statutes in that capacity. It's when the non-compliance starts to happen that drifts, that conversation drifts, and it can't be escalated to take action at that point. So in that case, if they're not registered, they don't have their trust certificate, it would be amazing for us as local law enforcement to have the ability to take the next level of that conversation and actually conduct enforcement, not have to pass it off to the feds to do that. But at this time, it would be educate, have a conversation, try to get them to bring that drone to the ground, and then report that to the authorities that can prosecute on the law side, on the fed side.
So in the current statute regarding private property and drones, there's already a section in there about videotaping, photographing, etc., that it's prohibited. So we're already regulating it to a degree, but if it was someone that was not registered, i.e. a sex offender that was videotaping, he's not breaking the law. I mean, it's in state statute, but he's not breaking the law. It's not something that you as a local law enforcement can address if he was a sex offender? Because he wasn't registered, but he was flying over.
Yeah, on the registration, we couldn't enforce on the state side, but we could enforce the MCL that's on the book as operating as a sex offender. How that would play it forward and what that would look like for the elements of that crime, that's not one I've investigated before, so I'm not sure exactly what the approach would be, but you would have to make sure you had the elements of the crime before you conducted that enforcement action in that statute. So we'd have to dive a little deeper into that. Okay. But I think the key in that statute is the operate aspect of it, where we're not regulating the over. And so if there's a way to reword this section that we can just remove the over with continuing the same intent of protecting the enjoyment of the property, we would be in full support of that.
Roger that. And one last question. So kind of back to 53, 25, and 26. So if you represent a lot of law enforcement, so Sheriff Bouchard's group, et cetera, I'll ask you a similar question when posed with that risk. Obviously, when a gun is drawn, there's a risk or there's a threat, you can respond. That risk, say at U of M Stadium, what was that response time just to identify that person? The TFRs you had mentioned, so they're in the air. What was that response time to get to that operator?
Pretty quickly, within a minute or less, to get to most of those operators. I don't think we can use the Woodward Dream Cruise, Comerica Park operations, or U of M as what happens across the state. Because those operations, they deal with those incursions on a routine basis. They have teams dedicated to that response. They have many operators watching the drone detection. They're dialed in that way. And so it scares me on some of the other stadiums, open-air stadiums that we have across the state, that we don't have a lot of enforcement. We can't put TFRs up because we don't have the ability to do that. So as Michael was talking, the identifying of friend or foe has to happen very quickly. Is this a good drone, a bad drone? And then we have to make a decision. So that loop is going to have to get closed very quickly. So to your point, yes, at those locations they can identify and get to those operators quickly, but that's not what we're seeing across the state on events and everything else.
Yeah, and that's a best case scenario. It's still taking a minute plus, and that's a drone response too. Drone, and then I seen in the video the police bicycling out to the individual. So definitely minutes, a handful of minutes there. In that response time. And I had another question, but I guess it kind of disappeared. So I appreciate you being here.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other additional questions for Mr. Rybar? Not seeing none. Thank you for your time, sir. Appreciate it. That pretty much concludes our hearing today. Representative Frisbee moves to excuse absent members. There being no objection, the motion prevails. There being no further business before the committee stands adjourned.